Outback Stories celebrates the pioneering spirit of Australia. It makes little difference if your family came on the first fleet or on a leaky boat last week. Our unique national identity was born and bred in the Outback. These are your stories.
Oh, the springtime it brings on the shearing, and it's then ye will find us in droves to the west country stations all steering, when they seeking a job off the coast.
Working hard, playing hard, drinking hard, and probably saying too much or too little, the shearer was probably the best known of all the itinerant bush workers. The sheer number of recitations and songs and yarns about shearing and shearing life is testament to their extraordinary contribution to our folklore.
Shearers were also justifiably proud of their role in Australia's financial boom times of the colonial era, when they rode high on the sheep's back. "29 English sheep arrived with the first fleet, but it didn't take long to realise they were better suited for the stew pot than growing wool. A few years later, enterprising colonials imported Spanish merinos, a sheep much better suited for our climate. They thrived, and their soft wool became the stuff of outback legend. The shearer's job was to shear the heavy wool from the sheep as cleanly as possible. For the first 90 years of Australia's shearing history, the wool was peeled from the sheep with hand blade shears, such as the Ward and Payne. The first authenticated daily tally was set in 1835 by Tom Mearley, who shore 30 sheep.
There's 24 shearers a shearing in a row. The whistle toots and away they go, with siding blows and second cuts, and half the buggers sewing up guts.
By 1892, Jackie Howe, a gun shearer, managed to shear 321 in a single day.
Yeah, apart from going into the record books, they named a singlet after him.
I shore away the belly wool and trimmed the crotch and hocks, then opened up along the neck while the rousey swept the locks, then smartly swung the sheep around and damped him on his rear. 2 blows to chip away the wig, I also took an ear.
Shearers were paid for every sheep they shore, and the boss of the board always kept a keen eye out to make sure that they were shorn cleanly. Clip an ear or take a nick out of a leg, and there'd be a cry for "Tar here!" and the roustabout and the tar boy would come to look after the sheep. If the sheep was really butchered, the boss would put a blue mark on it, a rattle mark, and the shearer wouldn't be paid for that one and wouldn't be too happy.
Most shearers were itinerants, and like any army, they moved around the country, first on horseback or foot, some on bicycles or Cobb and Co coaches, and later by train. There was always a rush to sign on before other men arrived at the station.
Yeah, we all meet here once a year, and we don't know one another. There's no love and affection and harmony between us. It's like getting a team of bullocks to pull together. They're poling on one another all the time, you might say.
Between seasons, they took other work, like fruit picking, or, in hard times, hung around like swaggies on the wallaby, waiting for the next season. Many were hard cases with the booze. Although alcohol was forbidden in the sheds, many shearers foolishly spent their season's cheque at the first opportunity.
Yeah, we worked like horses and spent our money like asses.
Going on the rantan at the season's end saw many a shearer's cheque jump the bar, and there were plenty of devious shanty publicans ready to lamb down the poor sods. The really hard cases were typically fleeced for 3 days and then thrown into the hotel's dead house, a small room at the rear of the shanty where they were sobered up and sent on their way. These were hard lessons.
All among the wool, boys, all among the wool. Keep your blades full, boys, keep your blades full. I can do a respectable tally myself whenever I like to try. They know me round the country as Flashjack from Gundagai.
Accommodation in the shearers' huts, often shared with the cook and his cooking outfit, were basic. The men, most had never met each other before, worked early until late and were sustained by a typically monotonous diet centred around mutton stew, damper and plum jam, and litres of stewed black tea. Sundays were a day off and spent reading, gambling, getting a haircut, washing clothing and yarning. Sometimes a concertina, accordion or fiddle appeared, and a sing-along ensued.
Hurrah, me boys, me shears are set. I feel both fit and well. Tomorrow you'll find me at me pen when the gaffer rings the bell, with Hayden's patent thumb guards fixed and both me blades pulled back. Tomorrow I'll go with me sardine blow for a century or the sack.
The best shearer in the shed was known as the ringer. It was a position all shearers dreamed of. The ringer, the fastest shearer, was the one receiving the highest season's cheque. It was physically tough work, bending over the struggling sheep. After a day's shearing, the men would often crawl back to their quarters on all fours, recline on their bunks, and dream of home, loved ones, and better times.
The rousey has no soul to save. Condemn the roustabout, and head 'em in and head 'em up, and get the bell sheep out, and take 'em by the windpipe and sometimes by the roots. But shear 'em nice and easy when you see the boss's boots.
The sheep washers and shearers were especially prone to all manner of ills, and took copious doubtful medicines for lumbago, rheumatism, sciatica, and bad blood. Any sign of rain was met with a wry smile, for the shearers couldn't shear wet sheep, and were paid off on rainy days. On those days they looked forward to card games, singing and other entertainment. They particularly liked songs and poems about shearers and sheep, sheep, sheep. Most shearers could read and write, and magazines like The Bulletin, often called the Bushman's Bible, were extremely popular, especially when they carried stories by Henry Lawson, Banjo Patterson, and Steele Rudd. Generally, shearers earned very good money, and they still do. But they certainly had to fight for their rights and better conditions. They sowed the seeds of early organised labour, and their main union, the Amalgamated Workers' Union, led the Great Strike of 1891, coinciding with widespread changes in the industry and the Australian political arena. An old-time pastoralist, Donald Gunn, writing in the Goondiwindi Argus in 1934, said, "The shearers were characters in their way. Before the sign-on roll was called, they would eat out of your hand. If they were near a gate, they would rush to open it for you. They would chop wood for the kitchen, help the children feed the poddy lambs, and make themselves so nice. But once they signed the roll, things were different. They would go to the shearer's hut and find fault with everything. And as for opening a gate for the boss, it simply wasn't done. As for food, anything pleased a shearer before he signed on, but afterwards it was very hard to get a cook good enough for him. They were always whinging and whining. When the shed cut out, the shearer became quite normal again, and would do anything for you. And as he waved and shouted, 'Hooroo! See you next season, boss!' Station life was regimented. The flocks had to be collected from the grazing areas, yarded, counted, dipped and squeezed and rubbed, with some of the station hands working in water from sunrise to sunset. The sheep needed to dry, and then the shearers started clipping the wool with a ferocity that described them as tigers. In the blade days, 80 sheep a day was a good average.
Merino sheep are sly and cantankerous beasts."
Banjo Patterson had a few words to say about merinos. People have got the impression that the merino is a gentle, bleating animal that gets its living without trouble to anyone, and comes up every year to be shorn with a pleased smile upon its amiable face. The truth is that he is a dangerous monomaniac, and his one idea is to ruin the man who owns him. Nothing will keep merinos alive. If they are put on dry saltbush country, they die of drought. If they are put on damp, well-watered country, they die of worms, fluke, and foot rot. They die in the wet seasons, and they die in the dry ones. The hard, resentful look on the faces of all bushmen comes from a long course of dealing with merino sheep. The poems about dying boundary riders and lonely graves under mournful she-oaks are the direct outcome of the poet's too close association with that soul-destroying animal. The biggest change to the sheep industry came in the 1890s with the acceptance of machine-powered shears. The old brigade fought the whole idea of machine shears, but it was a losing battle. By 1900, machine shearing was the norm, although it was as late as 1949 when Jackie Howe's blade tally was broken by a machine shearer when Dan Cooper shore 325 in a day. Shearing sheds were unbelievably noisy places. Bells, whistles, shouts, and of course endless bleats. The early machines, powered by steam, added to the cacophony. The turn of the century hailed in a new era. One model sheep station, The AA's property, Windy, on the Liverpool Plains near Corindi, claimed its new sheds were designed for the comfort of the workers, with the accommodation being spacious and convenient, the kitchens and mess huts being as good, or if not better, than many homes. The shed had a separate engine for shearing machines and hydraulic wool presses. The main shed held 4,000 sheep in case of rain, so the shearing was never interrupted. Windy's shearers used the new Daisy machine shears, and the Chief Wool Class's record book for 1901 showed that they had processed 60,000 sheep for 1,627 bales of wool. There were 41 shearing stands. The following year, they hit 100,000 sheep for the season. Shearers became resigned to the electric shears. Contractors ruled the sheds. Bullock and horse drays were replaced by trucks to connect with railway branch lines, which transported the meat directly to the abattoirs, and the wool bales directly to the wharves. The old shearing songs and recitations started to disappear, replaced by the gramophone and the radio. Yes, today's shearing board is very different from the colonial era. Shearers, men and women, are highly skilled and highly paid professionals. They are a valued part of station life and are well looked after as part of the team.
The Merinos remain as cantankerous as ever.